for most people who are just starting out, a lot of people do one thing and they want to do one thing well, and that's it. And I think you start there, then you open up some additional doors. You don't have to be quite as selective when you're starting out, because I think part of entrepreneurship is failure. Part of entrepreneurship is making mistakes and learning new skills and getting just, the overall what you do being better, right? Like lifting the entire
Definitely.
foundation. And so you don't always have to be quite as selective then, because it's not just about succeeding, it's about learning.
All right, DJ Swivel, appreciate you coming on the podcast. For anybody who doesn't know, I think probably a lot of people in our community are familiar with you, but I know you've won a Grammy. You've worked with a crazy list of artists: Beyonce, Jay-Z, Rihanna, on and on. You make plugins. You're an entrepreneur. You're creating content, doing all kinds of stuff. Welcome, man. Excited to chat.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Always love joining the community here, and yeah, nice intro. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, for sure. So, man, I know there's all kinds of stuff we can chat about. We basically have been already kind of chatting before this.
A little bit, yeah.
But yeah, maybe just as a little bit of a starting point, not to get super deep into it, but maybe a little bit of kind of your backstory, and then we can jump into the gems.
Sure. So I, was always into music. Made the choice after high school. I was already producing and DJing in high school, and so I had already dabbled, played some instruments and stuff like that. Wasn't very great at anything. DJing kind of opened up some doors for me. But I knew that I was passionate about music. So when I graduated high school, I decided to go to college for music. Uh, did a year out of school in Toronto, or outside of Toronto, didn't really like it. Ended up going down to Full Sail, and that sort of was my foot in the door into the American side of the music business. I'm from Toronto, so being Canadian, I had to find a way in to the U.S. where all of my favorite artists worked. And then once I graduated school, I had a visa, so I moved to New York and eventually landed an internship with a guy named Duro. If you don't know Duro, he started Desert Storm Records, signed Fabulous. He was partners with DJ Clue, so that's how they kind of came up. And also world famous producer, mix engineer, like just incredible talent. And so I got an internship at his studio, and the first day I worked there, I was working with Fabulous and Styles P on a remix for Mariah Carey. I think it was either We Belong Together or Don't Forget About Us, one of them. But
Wow,
Clue did a remix, and that was my first day as an intern. And
nice.
yeah, and then I kind of knew I was in the right place, and then I just spent a few years interning and working on a bunch of projects under Duro, and then eventually kind of went off on my own and started with Fabulous, and then eventually landed this job with Beyonce, and then Chainsmokers after that, and then BTS, and now I live in Los Angeles and kind of do a bunch of different things now. So I'm still writing and producing and mixing, and I also make plugins and sample packs, and dabbling in NFTs and all these other sort of things. So I try to kind of spread my attention around, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I love that. I definitely want to get into those last few things you were talking about, the entrepreneurship and some of those. But I guess just maybe real quick, because I know people are going to wonder, like, man, that's an incredible list of credits and people that you were able to connect with. Is there anything you can kind of attribute that to, like as far as, I don't know, maybe the attitude you have or the way that you talk to people or whatever it is that allowed you to, I guess, first get that internship, and then it sounds like, form that relationship with Fabulous that sounds like led to Beyonce. Is there anything kind of tangible or something that you can think, like, why does that work so well for you? Why have you had so much success with that
Yeah,
type of networking?
well, I think it started by when I was working for Duro. All I wanted to do was provide value. So it was an unpaid internship to start. So that's one way of providing value, because you cost nothing. So any net positive you contribute to the studio or whatever it's always a net positive, because you really have no costs. So that's step one. And I know there's a lot of talk with like, oh, interns should be paid and blah blah blah. But when you have a lot of people wanting to get into a business, there's plenty of people who will do it unpaid. So you kind of have to compete. That's just the
Mhm.
reality.
Yeah.
Um, Being in a city like New York is important. I was in New York at the time. New York's a little less important with music now, but certainly Los Angeles and Atlanta and Miami and Nashville. You want to be in a city where people are, where your peers and the talent you want to work with live. Um, and then I think it's just a matter of like, I mean, it's a number of qualities. I work really hard. I'm willing to put in the hours. I never tell artists no if they say, if they at the, especially at that time. Now I have a little more autonomy, but as an intern, it was just like, whatever you need from me, I'm available to do whatever. And so again, it goes back to just providing value. And then on top of that, you got to learn your craft and get good at it. Um, and then on top of all that, you got to be adaptable to your environment. You got to, the way that I speak to Fabulous is different than the way I speak to, like a younger female pop star, for example. Like the how you engage with them, how you interact in the studio, the jokes that you tell, the humor, the whatever, all these little like human idiosyncrasies that we all have, like you want to try to adapt to who you're with. And that's not about being fake or anything like that. It's just about the artist is meant to feel very comfortable and they want to be comfortable in their environment. And so if your personality is culture shock to an artist, then you may not stick around for very long. So, and I've had artists that, I do a good job no matter what I do, uh, but I've had artists that I didn't gel with personally, and I've had other artists that I gelled very well with personally. And so that's just part of, finding your tribe, so to speak, and
Yeah.
and making sure you're comfortable in the studio, they're comfortable in the studio, and you build a relationship that way.
For sure. Yeah, no, that's a
Yeah.
lot. That's a lot of good gems there, talking about being in the right place, and that giving value thing. I think sometimes people underestimate what that really means. Like I remember my first internship at a studio is that same kind of mentality of like literally whatever it was, I would get it done. Whether if it was like trying to find something, some little cable that was like buried deep in some closet, like whatever it was, I was like, I'll stay here all night, in whatever it takes.
Yeah.
So I think that that's really important. And there's sort of like this, um, almost like this lazy version of it where it's like, I'm sure you get this like a DM, like, hey, I'm willing to work for free. Like, what can I do to help? And it's like, that's actually not really providing value. Like you're making work for me. Like, I don't know
Yeah,
what you can do.
exactly. And I deal with that a lot is like, if I have to manage you, then that's, you're just creating another job for me.
Yep.
So, in music, we're most of the time we are sole proprietors, or maybe we have an LLC or something, but usually we run our own businesses. It's usually a business of one, or maybe you have one employee or one assistant or one whatever under you, but it's not often, unless you're building like a very corporate environment, when you're making music and building sample packs and producing and mixing and writing songs, whatever, you're kind of just one person. And so if you bring somebody on who's meant to help, and then you have to dictate everything that they do, and they can't figure it out on their own, now you actually have three jobs, because you have your
Right.
creative job, then you have your job managing your staff, which is a whole separate job, and then the staff has their job, the assistant has their job. So instead of just adding one, now you've actually created two, and you have to kind of carry one of them. So yeah, it's a great point. And yeah, I think anybody who's getting into the business, like, you have to be a self-starter. You have to be able to look for problems and solve them. If you can solve problems
That's what
before
it
I
is.
recognize a problem,
Exactly right.
you're an ace to me,
That's exactly what it is. And so, one example of this, because maybe people are wondering, like, okay, well, I don't know. I was sending DMs saying I can help. What am I supposed to do? So just one example is my buddy Richards, who's on my team now. The way that he reached out to me was he DM'd me and he said something like, hey, I noticed the hashtags you're using right now on Instagram aren't really working that well. Here's a list of hashtags you can use right now. I was like, oh, okay, cool. You know, it wasn't like a big thing, right? And then I think from there, maybe he sent me some content like, hey, I just made some stuff that I mocked up. You could use it or not or whatever. And then after that, he reached out and offered and said, hey, I can manage your, your Instagram for you. And then so then I brought him on, and then I see like, oh my God, he knows how to do all these other things. He knows how to build funnels and write copy and all this stuff. And now he's like a huge part of our business and our team.
Yeah.
But it was that way that he reached out. It wasn't, hey, I'd love to be a part of the team and let me know if there's anything I can do. He just did it. And so that would be a good example for anybody who's like listening, like, well, or watching, like, man, well, so what do I do? Well, I don't know. Check it out. Go to DJ Swivel's, social media or wherever, figure out what's important to him, figure out what you can do. Like you said, what's the problem that you can solve that maybe you either aren't aware of or just haven't gotten around to, and just solve it. And then bam, now
Yeah.
that's the end.
Like I'll give you a good example in my world right now is I especially through the pandemic. I mean, first of all, through most of my career, I was never really a content guy because I was so focused. I was working with artists in scenarios where I can't share the content anyways. So I never tried to build a big YouTube presence. I never tried to build a big, anything. And then last year I spent more time on YouTube, more time on Twitch, and interacting and engaging with a community of fans, and that's been great. But the downside to it is that it's a lot of work. It's a full time job. I mean, like running a podcast,
Sure.
it's a full time job being able to manage the flow of content. If you're also producing records and mixing records and doing all the other these are obligations you can't turn down. So the only time to do content is in between when you have breaks from that stuff. And so one of the things like I would love to do more of is like tutorials. But for me it's a challenging thing because I don't know what's always interesting to a young producer. I because sometimes there's a disconnect. I forget. I've been doing this a long time, so I don't always know what's the most interesting thing. So if somebody came in and was like, hey, I can build out a bunch of tutorials for you, and then here's the content, here's the plugins, here's whatever, then I can just open it up and then do my version of and say, okay, this is how I would apply this type of effect or this type of thing. That saves a significant amount of my time and is like a value add to what I'm doing. So these are the types of things that young producers or just people looking to get into the business, maybe managers or whatever, can do. Social media is another good one,
Yeah.
and engaging with all the things that doesn't require my attention.
Yeah. No, I mean, hey, that's a great example. I hope somebody takes advantage of that and
Yeah,
hits you up and has a whole incredible
yeah.
outline and
Yeah.
stuff ready for
Just
you.
putting
That's
that
it.
out there. I mean, that's a problem, like is a
You just
day
teed that
day to
up.
day problem in my life. If one of your audience is like, "Oh, I'm really good at that. I can come up with a bunch of content. Cool. Let's connect." And then what it does is it opens doors to the other avenues of my business. So, I have a publishing company. I have a label like, if you're also a really dope producer and I can help you get some placements, and we can there's business to be had on both sides there, so it's a kind of net benefit for everyone involved. So these are the types of things. It's like get your foot in the door, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, your business is a lot larger than I originally thought, and I can help you here and here, and by the way, here's where you're going to pay me. And there's just so many different ways to work in this business. It's kind of never ending.
Definitely, definitely. So I do
So
want to get into some of those other ways you've been working. I know you've got the plugins. I know you're doing a lot of stuff.
yeah.
Kind of on the entrepreneurial side. So I'm just wondering, kind of what was the motivation for that? Because like you were having success and continue to have success in let's call it the quote unquote industry,
Yeah.
right? So what made you also want to be your own boss and be an entrepreneur at the same time?
Well, I was always my own boss, and I always viewed even being a mixer, a producer, a songwriter, like you're an entrepreneur, like that's your business. You're the CEO of a business of one, but it's still a legitimate business. So I um, that was always kind of there, and I kind of grew up in an entrepreneurial-ish family. Well, not really, but my mom was a news anchor, and she had like, some success herself, and I was always taught to work hard and go after the things you wanted. So kind of what I did is I got really good at being a engineer, producer, and created success there. And then after a certain period of time, you realize, all right, this is kind of easy and I can keep doing this, but I want to challenge myself with something new. So it started with like, well, let me invest in some companies. Let me kind of dip my toes in these other things. A friend of mine wanted to start a magazine, wanted my help with it, a music magazine. So I, co-founded Headliner Magazine with an editor in the UK. And, um, I these you start to see these opportunities they kind of are presented to you, but if you're so focused on making music, you're not going to be receptive to them. You might not even realize that there's an opportunity being presented to you when it's there. So after I kind of got comfortable making music, I said, all right, let me start adding some things. I can do more. I have more time. I have more energy. I have more bandwidth. And then I just sort of started looking at things that would, anytime I added something new to the portfolio of businesses or things that I was doing, it had to tick two boxes. And now I've sort of added a third box, but that's not super relevant right now. The two boxes were: is this new venture going to reinforce or support my brand as a producer? And alternatively, is my brand as a producer going to support and lift up this new venture that I'm doing? So plugins, as an example, having plugins with my name on it elevates my brand as a producer, but what I've accomplished as a producer elevates the plugin brand. And so it's like mutually beneficial both ways. So it has to be connected to music or entertainment in some fashion. So that was kind of my thought process when I kind of opened doors for something new,
Yeah.
and that's proved to be quite valuable. And now the third box, now it needs to tick after a recent meeting with my manager, Neil Jacobson. Is he asked me to read a book called Essentialism, and I read it, and it also taught me that sometimes I'm doing too much, and I need to like really be laser focused. So it's not just does it support your producer business? Does the producer business support this new business? It's also, is this the best use of my time? And so that's now become the third metric, is like, for whatever bandwidth is required, is it really worth it for me?
Yeah.
But
That
you
one's
have to
like,
have these boundaries and parameters on yourself. Otherwise, you'll just get lost in so much opportunity out there.
right.
So,
Yeah, and it can be overwhelming. And I can speak from my experience. I imagine the same for you. The more wins, the more success, the more visible you are, there's more and more opportunities. And you really have to get better at that third thing you mentioned of basically learning to say no to, I don't know,
being
9 out of 10,
selective.
99 out of 100 things, and doing your best with the information you have to be like, yes, this is the thing that's worth my time and energy, because it's so easy to split that focus. And I'm more guilty of this than anybody, or as guilty as anybody, where it's like, as creative people, as entrepreneurs, like, we want to do all this different stuff and it all sounds exciting, and they might be multiple good ideas, and they might check the other boxes of whatever else that it supports your music and whatever else. But it's like, man, that is one of the big challenges for sure, is figuring out, okay, what's going to be the thing that's going to move the needle the most for me
Yeah,
right now,
exactly.
which is not an easy thing to answer.
Yeah, but also I think for most people who are just starting out, a lot of people do one thing, and they want to do one thing well, and that's it. And I think you start there, then you open up some additional doors. You don't have to be quite as selective when you're starting out, because I think part of entrepreneurship is failure. Part of entrepreneurship is making mistakes and learning new skills and getting just, the overall what you do being better, right? Like lifting the entire
Definitely.
foundation. And so you don't always have to be quite as selective then, because it's not just about succeeding, it's about learning.
Definitely.
But then once you get to a point where you have a few successes and you have a few things that are going well, then you have to start to become incredibly selective over where your time is spent, because it's very easy for you to take on something new, and sure, maybe you get halfway there on that new thing, but you don't have enough attention to give it everything, and then the lack of attention on the existing things might sink a couple other businesses you have. So you have to
Right.
be very careful in making sure that whatever you take on, you actually have the time to do it and the
Yeah, no, and
resources.
there's some nuance there, right? Because you're right. When you're first starting out, it's almost closer to, well, you should almost say yes to everything. Like try a lot of different things, because you
Yeah,
don't know what's gonna resonate, you don't know what's gonna work, and it's all gonna be a learning experience. But then at a certain point, you do have to kind of hone in on things. And then and actually, what's interesting is, in a way, it kind of expands out, because yes, you have to be more and more selective, but as you grow, at least for what I've found, I am able to do more things, because now I can leverage other people's times. I can have partners, I can have, team members, and I can help build maybe the system that now can run without me spending that time on there. So it allows me to do more things, but because now I've, accumulated this leverage of, people, money, resources, whatever. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's almost like goes wide to small to wide again, is kind of like
exactly.
the journey.
Yeah, yeah. So
Um,
it's a challenge, but it's a worthy challenge. Like you always hear, like diversify your portfolio. Well, your time is just another portfolio. So make
Definitely.
sure you're diversifying it, but you're also, what you're investing in. You know what your where your time is being spent, how it's being spent, and you can capitalize on it, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure, for sure. So, what's kind of the process for you with the plugins, as far as the marketing? What's the funnel look like? Where's the traffic come from? The sales process? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, so this is one of those areas where I'm still learning. We talked about this a little bit earlier, where I'm still learning. There's a lot that goes into making plugins, and so as a bootstrap business, I funded it myself. I didn't go and raise outside capital. I don't have a large team. Um, I had to figure out the efficiencies in how to build something first. And so step one is you got to have a product. So you got to learn how to build a plugin. And of course, I have a development team, but they're developing on my direction and on my ideas and my design. And they'll send me, for example, if I want a distortion, they'll send me, something that has way more controls or knobs than I need, that I can then design the sound the way that I want, and then that gets like baked into the end product. So I'm heavily involved in the creative process, and then once you have a product, you're ready to sell, and you got the artwork, and you got the trademarks, and you got the manuals, and the end user license agreements, and all the little details. Then you have to figure out how to sell it, and that was a whole other challenge for me, because it's a completely different way. Like actually making a product is very similar to making a song, right? It's having taste, it's having the work ethic and drive and resources to, if you can't do something, go and hire the person who can, like, bring in resources. Same thing if I'm making a record, I'm like, I need a guitar that sounds like Nile Rodgers or whatever. I know I can't play it, so I got to go and find a musician who can, to get this idea out of my head. So that was a very similar skill set, and that was easy. The challenge was selling, and thinking about funnels, and thinking about all this stuff. This is not how you sell your services as a producer. You're not worried about, well, it might be if you're going for a mass market and you're trying to sell a lot of beats. But if you're
Right.
working in the industry, you're working with songwriters and A&Rs, and you're being more selective over what you're working on as it is. So your way of selling is a lot of kind of word of mouth. It's a lot of, you worked with this artist and they love the sound of that, so they hire you that way. With selling product, you have to understand advertising, and coming up with cool marketing concepts, and collecting emails and engaging that email list. And I'm sure you have a number of things that you're doing that I probably need to be doing, but this is part of my learning process. So you know, to be honest, I'm kind of just at this point winging it. Well, I have a team
Hmm.
that handles all my ad buying and runs my ads for me. You
Okay.
know, they do fairly well, but like it's hit or miss sometimes, which is one of I noticed, like, once, what was it, Apple introduced that thing where you can't track ads or whatever.
Yeah.
That was a big hurdle for a lot of people in the ad space and
Oh
whatnot.
yeah.
So I'm like everyone else. I'm kind of just like feeling it out, learning from my mistakes, trying to improve. um you know
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I got you. I got you. Yeah. And by the way, I'm happy to take a look at it because that is kind of like what I've been geeking out on the last couple years is that process of, how do you generate that traffic in the first place, whether that's paid ads or organic traffic or content or whatever. Then it's how do we convert those traffic into leads? So how do I get them on my list, my email list, and my text message list, which by the way, I'm like all in on text. We can talk about that in a second, but SMS, I'm like all about, right? So now I go from traffic
Okay.
to lead. Now, how do I nurture those leads? How do I talk to them? Then next is conversion. How do we actually turn that lead into a customer? How do we sell something? And then delivery. How do we deliver that product? And then it's, retention, resell, upsell. How do we maybe add some continuity like a subscription or sell the next product or
Yeah.
be an affiliate for this product or whatever. And it's just, breaking it down step by step and kind of looking at, okay, where are we doing good? And then where can we do better? And what are the things we can do to make each one of those 5 steps better? And
Yeah.
that's kind of like just the way that I break that down, that I think about, that process.
Yeah, and we kind of do a lot of those things, but it's maybe less thought out. So, started selling plugins, said maybe I should get on YouTube and create content. And I've created a ton of content on YouTube. Keeping up with it is can sometimes be a challenge, but I'd like to get back on it more this year again. Same with like the Twitch streams, and we've done some really interesting things where sometimes artists will let us mix their song live on Twitch. So it's a real client, real session, real everything, and I can kind of go through the whole mix process, and that's been pretty fun and unique to do. Um, and then of course like collecting emails and engaging that email community. I've thought about the tech side of things. Love to hear your thoughts on text. I know a lot of people are
Yeah.
hype on that. I found that um, a lot of the services available, they limit your contact list in pretty meaningful ways. And so that was always sort of the rub for me, is like, well, I can engage with 50,000 or 100,000 person email list. You can't really engage with 100,000 people via text in the same way. I know they have tools for it, but also the services, I don't even think they allow that large of a pool. So curious to know your thoughts on that, and how
Yeah,
you
so
address it.
this is like, it's like people are going to think that we plan this. You're teeing me up. So we have a service.
We did not talk about this before, by the way.
Yeah, we did not talk about this at all. But we have a service. It's called crowdconnect.io, which is the service that I've been testing and using. It's our own text
And
messaging
it's similar
platform.
to Superphone Community.
It is, or community, but obviously I'm a little biased, but way
Of
better.
course.
So something like community, you don't actually own that list, right? At least last I spoke to them, you can't import your contacts there or export your contacts from there. It just exists in community, right?
Yeah.
With Crowd Connect, like the whole point for us is this ownership, right? Like people get confused, I think, sometimes about traffic and like, well, if I just have enough subscribers or followers or likes or comments, that's all I need. But the problem is, algorithms change.
Yep.
Like you said, even paid ads, these changes come. You can get shut down, all this kind of stuff. So you don't actually own that traffic. You don't own that connection. You're borrowing it from Mark Zuckerberg or Larry and Sergey, the dudes who run Google, or whoever else, right? You don't own it. But when I
Yeah.
have your phone number and email, now I own that connection. Now you can kick me off of MailChimp, but then I can take my emails and I can go somewhere else. You can kick me off of wherever. Well, I was going to say community, I can take my phone numbers, but you actually can't with community. With Crowd Connect, you could. And so that's the first thing, is like actually owning that data, right? The reason why these
Got it.
companies are worth so much money is the data. They have the data. So like, I want to get in on that. I want to have the data. I want to own that connection, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. And then we just integrate it into everything we do. Like you won't see an opt-in page for me for Legion Beats or Midi Money that doesn't have name, phone number, and email. Or
Right.
sorry, email and phone number, I should say. And the phone number sometimes I'll make optional, but more often than not, now I just put it in there as, hey, if you want to get on this free thing or this training or whatever it is, you got to get the phone number. And the reason why is a few things. One is that, email is great. I'm all in on email. But the open rates are, 10,
Pretty low.
20, maybe 30%, which is still good. It's all relative, but with text messages, it's 90% plus, right?
Right.
I've got a list right now on the Legion side that's over 100,000. I can press a button and 100,000 phones will buzz and that message will pop up. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that power is insane. And the flip side of that is you have to be careful about it because people will get annoyed if you text them too much or you text them the wrong thing because
Yeah.
it's very personal. It's the way that we talk to our friends and family.
Yep.
So that's why it's so powerful, but you have to be careful. And usually I recommend like no more than one text message per week. And even if you're doing it that often, it should probably have like a specific reason why. But man, it has made all the difference in the world. We did a beat pack launch for Black Friday just a couple months back, and we did like an early access list. And the basically we opened up the cart for the beat packs like 30 beats, plus we had some features on there and some cool stuff. And the base price was $47, but you could add some other stuff on there, of course. And so we got, I think it was about 4 or 5 thousand people on the early access list with
Hmm.
name, email, and phone number. And so 10 a.m. Sunday, we send out the text message blast and the email. And we did first we did $15,000 in sales in 15 minutes. And then ultimately did $50,000 in sales in that one day, selling a $47 beat pack because of that power of the text messaging combined with the email too. But there was no ads that we ran that day, zero, no paid traffic. It was just taking
Right.
that list, that data that we owned, that relationship that we owned, I guess is really a better way to say it. And being able to communicate with them the value that we had for them. So I'm
Wow.
I'm all in on it, and crowdconnect.io, and we can talk later. I can get you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for sure. 100%. Definitely want to talk about it.
Yeah, for
Love that.
sure, for sure. Yeah, and I think there's, well, like we were talking before, and we can talk after. I think there's some cool stuff we might be able to do, like as affiliates and stuff like that, which I believe really strongly in. Like it's been a huge part of building both Midi Money and Legion Beats to where it's a win-win of like, hey, let's just connect on this thing. You let your audience know about this, they'll be happy because it brings them value and it's something that they
Right.
want. You get money for basically just sending out an email or text message. I get free traffic or vice versa. So that's been big for me. And I never had that mindset of like, well, I don't want to give my audience to you or vice versa. Like to me, it's the opposite. Like let's all share, if we've got these audiences, it's
Yeah.
only going to help both of us to share that audience. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
No. 100%. 100%. I
Yeah.
love that. We'll chat more.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And that's something that I think that producers, I like to talk about that because it's something that, for the most part, I think producers have been real hesitant about. Like a lot of producers are so like precious with their list, with their audience. Like for one thing, they're afraid to sell, and it's like that's why they're there. They want, if your thing is good, they want to buy it from you. That's why they're subscribed or following you. Like that's the point.
Yeah.
And for another thing, they're terrified of like sharing that list with somebody else. And it's like, no, if that other person is giving value, they're gonna appreciate that you connected them with that person, especially if you have,
I th-
that.
I think that's that same producer mentality where a lot of producers, won't want to share. They won't want to share a drum pack or hey, what's your kick drum or what's the 808 you're using? And a lot of producers are very precious about, oh, I can't share that snare with you. I can't share that kick with you. I've never been that. I've always kind of just given my sounds away. I never cared because I'm like, the way that I make a record is going to naturally be different than the way you make a record. We can have
Yeah,
the same drum kit. We're going to make two different beats for sure.
yeah,
So I never really had a problem with that, but that does seem to speak to that same sort of mentality of like, oh, the kick is what makes me special, and it's like, no, it's like it's what's in your brain that makes you special. It's not any specific kick you use. You could swap that out and you'd be just as dope. So,
right.
yeah, that doesn't surprise me, but
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hope we can help change some minds in because you're right, it is kind of that same mindset of like I'd rather come from abundance where it's like, hey, if I have something that can help you, cool. I feel like you're gonna bring it back to me. And I don't know, to me that's just way more effective. And I see it too, like where people will like, they'll mess up relationships because of they feel like they were, had some slight injustice done to them, or they just don't like whatever. And it's like, man, like just be cool. Like if you guys can help each other, I don't know. To me, it's just I'd rather collaborate with people than feel like somebody's my competition. But
Yeah,
anyways,
yeah. No, it makes
that's
sense.
yeah, for sure. Um, Man, okay, let me see. Let me see. So we talked a little bit about, kind of your process with the plugins and stuff and kind of figuring that process out. What do you have coming up? What are you excited about coming up next?
So in November we dropped the latest plugin called Noctonal, and it's sort of a resonance shaper for mostly drums. But now I'm sort of exploring like some other avenues to use with it. We're doing some testing here, but it allows kind of drum tuning, but through resonance. So rather than like boosting 60 hertz, it's like let me boost E, or let me boost like F sharp or whatever. So you're able to like kind of tune your
Mm,
drums with these, um, root note resonances and harmonic overtones and whatnot. So that was pretty interesting and a pretty
that's cool.
unique approach to EQing.
Yeah.
Um, and that did has done pretty well, and we're really excited about it. But most importantly, it was like sort of a UI shift for us, where we went to a more digital looking UI, which I think is more resonates more and is in tune more with what young producers care about now. Like
Hmm.
when I was starting in music, it was sort of the beginning of the plug-in era, you could say. A lot of people were still analog, but Duro was digital, and so in order to get people over to digital, you had to sort of like bridge the gap by making like SSL models and 1176 models and LA2A
Right.
models and all
It
these
just
sorts of,
looked like the gear.
yeah, where it looked like the gear. And I think now the next generation's like, well, we're way past that. Like we just
Yeah.
want shit that works well and is cool and is interesting and functional UI and whatever. And so we kind of learned that. So now the focus for this year is to build out the next. We've already started the next plugin. It's going to be a channel strip, which I know doesn't sound exciting, but I believe I've come up with some unique ideas for a channel strip that have not yet been done before. And I think will be. I'm convinced that if we execute at a high level, I hate putting this out there before it's ready or anything like that, but I'm convinced if we execute on a high level, like it'll be the best channel strip in the game. I'm
Cool.
convinced of
Okay.
it. So that's kind of where my head is at now. A channel strip is also interesting because it's usable on for pretty much everything, and all of the other plugins we've built have been primarily like narrow focus, like this is a unique thing because, or um, whereas a channel strip is it's our first, like we've never done just a compressor by itself.
Hmm.
But doing a channel strip kind of becomes that, and it'll also allow us to kind of build out the solo compressor and solo EQ and solo limiter and all the other kind of things that you need, which ultimately would allow you to get to, I think, a subscription model, because I'm convinced that for music plugins, for a subscription to be effective, you got to have not just the cool shit, but you got to have the tool belt stuff too. You got to have like
Right.
the basic toolbox. Because
Yeah.
just like with HBO and Netflix, like we are going to get to a point of there's too many subscriptions, and you're going to have to pick and choose the ones that are best suited for you. And so
Right.
being well rounded, I think, is key.
Definitely. No, I think that makes sense. I think, Slate does a good job of that,
Yeah,
where it's this whole suite of plugins where if you wanted to, that could be all you used. So I
yeah,
think probably to really have that effective subscription, that
yeah.
makes sense. Although, you know what? You could also have, hey, we're really niching down and so I think there's probably
Here's the
different
thing that
approaches.
none of your other subscriptions will have, but you get these 7 plugins that are all just really unique and weird. Like, yeah, I
Right.
mean, I guess there's really no rules. Slate Steven's been a sort of mentor of mine in the space, and always got to show love to him, and I love his products. I'm sitting here talking to you on a Raven, and
Those Ravens look so cool. I know I
yeah,
had him on
yeah,
the podcast not too long ago. He's a cool guy for sure. Smart dude.
yeah, and I got the mic, the ML1, and even the little mics, and I have a Slate control. So I've got a ton of Slate stuff in my room. But yeah, I think he really built out an effective subscription model. Um, I think there's still room to do other things with subscription in plugins and music,
Of
but he
course.
certainly set the bar pretty high for sure. So
Yeah.
it's nice to have like a North Star to kind of aim towards.
Yeah, no, definitely. One sort of tangent that I started thinking about it because you're talking about how, okay, like these plugins were originally designed to emulate and look like this outboard gear. And now we're starting to get to a point in the evolution where it's like, well, why are we stuck with that? Like there's actually no limits in the digital space as far as what that thing can look like or how it can be represented. And it made me think of kind of just where we're going in general with some of this sort of Web3, metaverse and all this kind of stuff. Where like, right now Zoom does a pretty good job of recreating us sitting in a normal room together, right? It does an okay
Yeah,
job. Like it's
yeah,
not as good as us sitting in the same room. But like I think the next level will be some of this crazy VR stuff where it's like, well, why are we stuck to us like sitting in these chairs staring at each other? Like we can be, sharing ideas and flying around on some big like whiteboard where we're like writing down the things that we're saying and like flying over here. And I don't even know.
right.
Right, I'm just making something up, but I do think it's interesting to see where things are going to go as the digital stuff. Basically, we're in an era right now that'll probably seem really old eventually, that all of our digital stuff is like kind of a shittier version of the real life thing. And I
Right.
think we're just starting to get to that point now where we're like, oh, wait a second, we can actually do completely different stuff with less limits and like cooler weird stuff. So anyways, that was just a tangent
Yeah,
of
I
something I've
mean, I
been
think
thinking.
it's going to go there. I do a lot of tech investing and things like quantum computing and AI and machine learning and things like that. And I'm convinced like there will be a true metaverse, Ready Player One style, whatever. But you're not going to get there until the headsets are painless. Right now,
Mhm.
they're still big and heavy, and they hurt your neck, and they're not comfortable on your eyes, and whatever. If you can just throw on a pair of sunglasses and it blocks out everything, it weighs nothing. You got a decent battery life. The quality of the VR, the visualization is like wide peripheral frame of view. Um, then you'll be able to like really build out these unique worlds. But I think it's still a little bit niche. You still got a big box on your head.
Right.
You basically have a console on your face, which is
Yeah.
not really that comfortable yet. But I would imagine like there's rumors like Apple's building something. I would imagine if they're building something, it's probably they've tended in their history like only built things when the technology was ready to build it, and
Hmm.
they've let other people kind of be the guinea pigs and get there first.
Right.
The iPhone wasn't the first smartphone, but it
Right.
might have been the best smartphone, maybe if
Right.
if you believe that.
Sure.
And so I think it'll eventually get there. And also, I think people are lazy. Nobody wants to run around. Nobody wants to run around all day in a unique world. They don't want to run around in the real world all day.
Right.
So I think it'll take some time, but I think it'll eventually we'll get there. And what we're seeing with like Web3 and all the metaverse stuff and this whole NFT like stuff that's happening, we're seeing the beginning stages of it. Like we're literally watching sort of this framework being built, but it's still like really remedial stuff at the moment.
Yeah, no, totally. I think you're right. I think it is the very early stages, like maybe I don't know, Bitcoin, is MySpace, right? But like Facebook is coming, or maybe, Bitcoin is actually Friendster, and then the next thing will be MySpace, and we're not even, we're like three generations back from like whatever the,
Right.
the mass adoption is. But I do think it's things are moving faster and faster. So I'm curious as far as like, because I think pretty much everyone seems to agree that that stuff is where we're going. The blockchain, virtual reality, augmented reality, the Web3 stuff, NFTs. I'm curious for you. Do you see or are you using anything right now that you're like, oh yes, this makes sense right now. This actually has utility or yeah. I guess that's the question. Is
On
there
the
anything you're doing
NFT
right now?
side of things,
I guess with any, but yeah, sure, yeah, NFTs, blockchain.
no, not really. And I'm not pessimistic about NFTs in any way. Like I'm very optimistic, but I think what you're seeing right now is a lot of copycats trying to match the success of what someone else did. And to a degree, like that exists in the art community too, right? Like, you
Sure.
know, Picasso was influenced by Dali and like whatever. I mean, I'm not an art historian here, so I don't know if that's actually accurate. But the point I'm making is art is meant to inspire, and then you kind of same with music. It becomes derivative, right? Um, but you're seeing a lot of that right now, and you're seeing these like insane valuations on these things that are mostly derivative that I don't think is sustainable. It does feel like the kind of tulip bloom or whatever it was, the tulip market from back in the days. Uh, but what is happening is you have some companies that are actually trying to innovate on the technology and create new things and create the building blocks. I think those are the projects that are going to do really well in the space. But the idea of spending millions of dollars for land in the metaverse, that to me is kind of insane,
Yeah.
because it's, what value are you buying? Like, they can just make new land like with the snap of a finger, and just all of a sudden you have a million new plots of land. There's no, at least with Earth, there is limitations on what you can build and where you can build it and how you can, so the fact that millions of dollars are being spent for land in a digital world that isn't even built out yet, that to me is like, you know out of
Yeah.
control.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not pessimistic. I believe that the space is going to succeed. I just think a lot of what we see right now won't.
Right.
A lot of what we see right now is kind of the guinea pigs and the people testing the waters, and there just happens to be enough hype where they're all surviving. But there'll eventually, I think, be there'll be a pullback, and a correction, and people will start to then prioritize the products, or whether it's art, NFTs, or utility tokens, or they'll start to prioritize the things that actually have true value, whether it's artistic value or functional, value. So
Yeah, no, that's my thoughts exactly. That there's all this possibility from blockchain and metaverse, whatever. And we're at a stage right now where there's this bubble because there's so much hype around it that a lot of people are probably going to be very disappointed in, I don't know, 6 months or a year or whatever, because a lot of these projects, they don't
a lot of people are
necessarily.
going to lose a lot of money.
Yeah, for sure, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
And there's going to be certain ones that will, last and be like, oh my God, I can't believe you got whatever at this time. And I do think you're right that it's mainly going to be the ones that actually have utility. It's not just like, I get to say I own this picture because I do, sort of. We all get to look at it, whatever you want to say about that argument. But if owning that also allows you to go to this event and connect with this person and do these actual things, to me, that's going to be the thing those are the projects that'll last, that are going to be the ones in the future that really make sense. And
Right.
the
Yeah.
one that got me kind of the most excited was the first one where I was like, oh, I think that's something I can see the utility right now for myself is, have you heard of Rally.io?
No. Tell
It's
me
cool.
about it.
So Rally is and some of this is like a little over my head, all the exact, but it's like a side chain of Ethereum. It's its own coin. It's exchanged on, Coinbase and whatever, a bunch of exchanges. But essentially you can create your own creator coin as, again, I don't know the exact terminology, but almost like a subdivision of Rally. So like, if Illmind, he's got Blapcoin, which is like his own cryptocurrency.
Oh, is that's part of Rally?
That's
Got it.
on Rally, exactly right. And so there's all these different creators now that are doing that, right? And it's an application process, so not anybody can do it, specifically through Rally. But some of the nice things about it, like, anybody could technically create a cryptocurrency, but there's not this liquidity pool. Meaning, like, if I buy a bunch of some random cryptocurrency and now I want to exchange it back for dollars, there has to be a buyer on the other end. What's nice about the way Rally has it set up is, like, you can always convert, like, let's say I buy $1,000 of
Flapcoin to
Blapcoin.
Rally, and
Today I could convert that to Rally and turn that into dollars. And so there's all this cool stuff where you can do, where you say, hey, if you hold this amount of coins, you get these benefits. Or if you buy, this product with the coin, you get these certain benefits. And so that's something that actually I'm looking at doing right now, is I've got my application in process for Rally, because of that I can see like, oh, okay, this is something cool where the community can benefit, where it's like, okay, people can get, let's say, the Midi Money coin, right? And maybe we have something where, hey, if you hold whatever 100 Midi Money coins, then that grants you access to every week. I'm going to do a coaching call that's going to teach you about building your funnels, or every month we're going to have a special guest like DJ Swivel who's going to give you some behind the scenes whatever. And now there's some actual utility, there's some actual value. And the part I like about it is this concept that the community can benefit from the community growing, right? Like you buy that coin, you hold on to it, it's worth something because you're getting the reward, you're getting the thing, but also, hey, if it goes well, the value of that thing is going to continue to go up, and those
Right.
100 Midi Money coins could be worth, more in the
Thousands
future.
or tens of thousands or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Millions.
anyways, that was the first thing that I saw where I was like, oh, I think I can actually do something with that right now. That for me personally, I saw.
That's interesting. I'm gonna look into that as well. I think that's the issue. I saw Gary Vee talking about this. In order for any of these projects, whether it's an NFT project or a new token or whatever, in order for any of them to really last, the teams involved in building them, and this isn't, I mean, I'm sure there's some tokens that are like proof of use or whatever, like Bitcoin or whatever. You don't need the original founders of Bitcoin to be involved because it's 100% decentralized, and anybody can buy it, and the market, it's grown enough where the market, it survives itself, right? um, but you have to kind of bet on the people behind it, because if the people don't have the commitment to build this thing and run it for the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, then eventually you're just like, it's a ticking time bomb waiting for, when's the bottom going to be pulled out from under me, and when's everyone going to opt to get out,
Right.
lowering the value of whatever that thing you bought was. And so that's the key, is I think betting on people who have the patience, the time, the energy, the resources, bandwidth to be able to continue it over a period of time.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I think that's exactly right. Is being really careful about that and trying to see, okay, does this person have a track record? Do they are they committed to actually, keeping this thing going so that the value, continues to increase. Um, but then, assuming you do, I like, at least I like that broader idea of that you can, if you believe in somebody, a community, a person, an artist, a producer, whatever, that you can essentially buy in early to that community and benefit from being early. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
like that concept. There's something cool about that. Like, oh man, I heard DJ Swivel, he's the new, intern over here, but I think he's really dope just for fun. I'm going to put, $10 into his creator coin, and bam, 10 years later, I'm a millionaire. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So anyways, I kind of like
Well,
that
I'm gonna look
concept.
into it. Blapcoin, or not Blapcoin,
Rally.
Rally.io.
Yeah,
Okay.
rally.io. Yeah, let me know. And I'll let you know as I go through the process too,
Yeah, please
how it
do.
goes, because I think it's something dope. All right, man. Well, I've taken a lot of your valuable time, which I really appreciate. Maybe just to close it out, if you can let people know the best place to find you, anything, else coming up that people should know about, and anything else you'd want to wrap up with.
Sure. Well, easiest place to find me, it's at DJ Swivel on pretty much all social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. And then, link in my bio on Instagram has access to our Discord. We're going to get back. We kind of did a little pause over the holidays. We're about to get back into sort of doing our weekly Feedback Friday session. So every Friday, I'll like break down, people will send in music. Fans will send in music through through the Discord channel. I'll listen to it, break it down live on Twitch. And we've actually had some really unique things where fans will, it's been a great A&R tool for me, because some of these producers will come in and they're just like dope, like so dope. And they'll send in music that's like gives me an idea, and then I'll go write a song to it and then try to pitch it and place it. So I'm just in that stage where I'm looking to build on what I've done, build opportunities for the next generation of producers, through what I'm doing, open some doors for them, get them into the business. Um, yeah, so it's been a great A&R tool for me on that. So join the Discord, and then I have a few like little NFT projects we're working on right now. Maybe a little too early to talk about, but definitely coming soon. And yeah,
Okay.
just follow me on social media. You'll get You'll figure out what I'm doing pretty quickly. And of course, I have the plugins and sample. We're about to drop a new sample pack probably next week. That will be basses and 808s basses, live basses, synth basses, stuff like that. So if you're a producer, check out the pack. Maybe you'll like it.
Awesome, man. I'm sure I speak for everybody who's listening and watching. Appreciate you dropping the gems,
Thanks for
taking
having
some
me.
time out of your day and hanging out. Thanks, man.
Appreciate you, bro.